I don't think that, I think a lot of black Americans feel disenchanted with the Biden administration. I think they feel that a lot of the sentiments that we talked about here today, I think the black community shares it too. And I also will tell you one other thing too. I think a lot of the blacks, a lot of the minorities for that matter, but definitely the black community, they feel that they're taken for granted. And you and I talked about this off camera a little bit. We don't have to get too deep into this, but I worry that with Joe Biden doing the things that he does, it only sets up American citizens for failure. Tell me a little how you feel about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I could talk a lot about the black community, but I'll tell you a story about the white community as well. That I think the migration is really having a hard hit. I used to have a white roofer, and he had a hard time keeping a team. But with the Hispanic migration, with the way that they live, it's a lot easier for them to keep a roofing team. And a lot of times they live under one roof, which gives them the ability to price much better than, say, a white man roofer, as an example, a white American roofer, or just an American roofer, but many white men do roofing. And so I have a guy that does roofing, white male, and he's having a hell of a time competing against the migrants. And I think the same thing goes up and down the trades, that an American electrician, he may have household costs where the typical American lives mother, father, kids in a home, whereas the Hispanics that are coming to this country live 2 to 3 generations in a home, mother, father, grandmother, children. So there's an in-house babysitter, there's the cooking from home, whereas I think a lot of Americans are going to have to adapt to a population that are coming here that have a different cost basis for living. And that applies to business as well as just your living, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, I will say this. With the way that prices are going, you have President Biden, for example, on day one, kills the Keystone Pipeline. Obviously, that's resulted in higher gas prices and will continue to result in higher gas prices. Additionally, he's selling off our national, the reserve that we have to artificially keep prices as low as possible because this is an election year. You have, again, inflation essentially unchecked. At least they're not able to control it at this time. And this is what happens when you have a government that just continues to spend money and just think they can spend their way out of any particular problem. So my point is, families may have to get used to living the way you just described. I mean, housing values. Now, I'm a homeowner. I'm glad housing values are up. But then again, it has the effect where other people cannot buy a house. They can't afford to get a house. And you have interest rates so high right now. It just puts it that much. It puts the American dream even further out of the reach of regular working American class individuals. Does that pretty well sum it up for you?
Yeah, the American dream used to be upward mobility, where you wouldn't just get in one house and just root there forever. You would dream about having a bigger house. And I think those things are becoming much, much harder, in that to buy another house, you may be competing with someone who may have 3 or 4 working adults there. And that's very different. It's definitely for renting. And it's going to be very different for Americans to come to grips with it when they're looking for a place to rent and they can't understand why it's so expensive. It's because that place may be occupied by many more people than they would ever think of occupying it by.
I got you. All right. I want to pivot at this point. Let's take a quick look at this video, give our voices a rest, and then I want to talk about this video from today on Fox News, and we'll talk about it here in just 1 second. If you have anything you want to say in the meantime, let me know, and I can stop the video, but let's run it. It's a few minutes long here. Here we go.
And now, all right, let's get you to the second hour here. President Biden on the world stage, arriving in Europe to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, as Washington insiders raise new concerns about the 81-year-old president, revealing the clear signs of his cognitive decline that become more obvious during private meetings. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Farina.
Morning, partner. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. The White House quickly firing back at this report in the Wall Street Journal, calling the claims false and politically motivated. That long story, however, and it is long, it includes interviews with dozens of high-ranking officials and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who all agree that behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping.
Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is going to join us in a moment. But first, White House correspondent Peter Doocy is traveling with the president. He's just landed in Paris, or maybe you were there the night before. Peter, good to have you on.
Good to be here. Bonjour. And despite that Wall Street Journal item that they say sources information from 45 different people detailing what these folks are saying is basically questions about President Biden's acuity, here in Paris today, President Biden is not doing anything, even though we were told on the Air Force One trip over here that this trip was going to be action-packed.
It's going to be action-packed, I think extremely moving and extremely important 3 days in France.
When I think of President Biden, I'm not exactly thinking of action-packed anything, but I digress.
With business, with speeches, and with an opportunity for him to say thank you directly to the veterans who saved democracy, saved the free world, and set the stage for the decades of peace and prosperity that followed.
That Wall Street Journal item the White House is taking issue with includes a story from Speaker Mike Johnson, who recalls a recent meeting with Biden about canceling liquid natural gas permits for Europe for climate reasons. Here's the quote. Mr. President, you are helping Vladimir Putin, Johnson told the president, according to one of the people briefed on the exchange. Biden said that wasn't true and that the new policy was only a study, according to several people familiar with Johnson's version of what happened. Johnson was dismayed that Biden appeared to have forgotten details of his own policies, they said. Tomorrow and Friday, President Biden is expected to travel from here in Paris to Normandy, a few hours away, for these commemorations of what is expected to be the last milestone D-Day anniversary that has some of the 150 D-Day veterans who are still alive present for the ceremonies. We do expect in Normandy, or at least in the Normandy area, President Biden is also going to meet with Vladimir Zelensky. And so expect to hear this president talk a little bit about how he thinks things in Europe right now, maybe not that different than they were 80 years ago. Dana?
An important trip. We're glad you're there for us. Thank you.
You know, my first thought, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Did they shorten the stairs for him coming out of the airplane? I think I read that.
I've read something like that too. And what they were talking about, I think they may talk about it in this clip actually a little bit more, is something to do with the fact that they made a special exit for him or take him out a special way so that he can avoid the press and they don't have to see him trying to walk on and off the plane. It just surprises, and John, tell me if you agree with this. It surprises me that people see this day in and day out, or maybe they don't, maybe they're not paying attention. But when you see this man walking up and down the stairs and he's so elderly, I just don't understand how people don't understand this and react accordingly. Raise their concerns. Well, what do you think about it?
It's definitely mind-blowing. It's kind of like propaganda at the highest form.
Okay, let's continue with this. It's just about done. I got a few questions.
Distributor. So you heard a little bit about that Wall Street Journal piece. I just want to read one more piece to you from that. This is Biden deferred so frequently to other lawmakers that much of the conversation didn't include him. Some people who attended the meeting recalled. When questions came directly to him, he would turn to staffers, they said. You couldn't be there and not feel uncomfortable, said one person who attended. I'll just say that. You've been in a lot of meetings with presidents.
Can you imagine being in a meeting with the president and everybody there doesn't want to say the obvious? It's kind of like what they call the pink elephant in the room. You're there. I mean, I can picture this in my mind's eye.